I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. My guest today is Dr. Klara Naszkowska, a cultural historian specializing in the early history of psychoanalysis. She is the founding director of the International Association for Spielrein Studies, a 2019-2020 Fulbright Visiting Scholar at Union Theological Seminary at Columbia University, and author of the book, The Living Mirror, The Representation of Doubling Identities in the British and Polish Women's Literature, from 1846 to 1938, published in 2014. Her most recent paper in English is Passions, Politics, and Drives, Sabina Spielrein in Soviet Russia. And she's authored many articles on Spielrein in Polish and English. She's currently working on a book on Jewish women psychoanalysts and the great wave of European intellectual immigration in the 1930s to the United States, and teaching on this subject at the Blanton-Peale Institute. If you're listening to this episode in the podcast stream, do know there is a video of this discussion on YouTube. Just head to Chapart Films YouTube channel or search for Rendering Unconscious Podcast on YouTube. You may find links to everything in the text accompanying this episode. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry. From Chapart Books, 2019. For more, please visit our publisher's website, trapart.net. That's TRAPART.net. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated. For more information, you can also visit my website, drvanessasinclair.net, or the podcast main website, renderingunconscious.org. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. Yeah, so tell us all how the Spielrein Initiative Institute came about.
Okay. Well, it started in an email conversation with John Launer, who's the author of Spielrein's biography. And we connected at some point. We started exchanging emails, and we both had this feeling that, well, that was a few years ago. I'm not sure how it actually went, but we both had this feeling that there are so many Spielrein scholars scattered around the world, and so who are not in contact with each other, and that there are also her papers that not many people have access to, not really have access to, but not really aware that you can pretty easily get access to. And we just started thinking that, what if we just brought those people together? So that was one thing, to create this platform of exchange of information, just to allow people to connect. Another thing was that John told me that this huge chunk of Spielrein's papers, I think he said there are around 2,000 letters, for example, in this, are in possession of those people living in Geneva or near Geneva, and that those people who inherited them in lawful way, but kind of strange way, which I'm not going to get into details. So they're I'm not going to get into details with this, but anyway, that they refuse people access to those papers. That John had that experience that he tried to access, and then at the beginning they were talking about it, and then it went wrong. So anyway, there's this huge chunk of papers that belong to Spielrein that that have not been cataloged. They have not been researched, copied, and we really have no idea if they're really even preserved properly. So we had this idea that if we create an association and approach those people as an association, not as a single person, that we might get a bigger chance of getting access to those papers. And we're hoping to be able to move them to a safer place, like Rousseau Institute in Geneva, for example, one of the things we're thinking about. And this this is happening, but in a little different way than we imagined, because they allowed one of the members of Spielrein Association, Henry Lothane, to access the papers. And he's working with Vladimir Spielrein, who's another member, and who's a great nephew of Sabina. And they have translated those papers from Russian to English, and I think they're almost ready to publish them. So this is good news.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, I mean, of course, she was like kind of erased for a long time, and her papers and her writings were buried for decades, and then have been unearthed, seems like multiple times. They've been like growing and growing in kind of position and notoriety over time. And of course, there's so much to still uncover. I would love to be able to help or to access those, and bring them out more and more.
Yeah.
What wonderful work you all are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. We're at a kind of halt now because, as you know,
everything is.
Everything is, yeah, obviously. But we had this conference planned for April 2020. We had to move it to April 2021. And then there's still a big question mark on that, right? If it's even happening, but hopefully.
But you had your first conference the year before, yeah?
No, this was going to be the first one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. There's been a lot of work and planning put into that. And I was very frustrated at some point. But, I was frustrated when we were making this decision to postpone it. And then a few weeks later, the pandemic really happened, and I completely forgot about it because there was so much, awful things going on at the same time, much worse than canceling or postponing a conference.
Yeah, no, but of course there's so much work. I was supposed to come to New York for the APA Division 39 conference, which was like the mid-March, and that got canceled, I think, March 8th. And at that point, it seemed like, oh, really? Is it really getting canceled? And then, of course, like within a week, everything was shut down. So, well, how did you discover her and get interested in Sabina Spielrein?
I was writing my PhD in Edinburgh, and I was in comparative literature, and I was using psychoanalysis to interpret literature. And I had two supervisors. One of my supervisors, Alexandra Smith, she was Russian, and she knew Spielrein, and she just introduced me to her. She told me there was this person. At that time, I don't know, what was it, 2010 maybe, 2011. We didn't know that much about her. I mean, the situation was completely different than today. And I remember reading her Spielrein's paper on destruction, and I wasn't that impressed the first time I read it. Obviously, I understood the significance of the fact that she wrote it in 1911 started, and then 1912 she published it, and then that Freud really picked up the subject of the sex drive and the death drive in 1920. But I didn't get that much into it. But after this, I read her diaries, and this completely blew my mind when I was reading her diaries. The fragments that we have, we don't have all of it. We have fragments, but they're diaries, and she copied her letters to her diaries, which was very thoughtful of her. And then started getting into it and just discovering this incredible woman, who she was, what she did, what her contributions were.
Yeah, no, she's really amazing, and I think very little has been translated into English, and it would be wonderful to be able to read more.
Well, I think we have a lot translated now. I mean, I think the end of 2018, December, maybe even, one book came out with 3, I think, or 4 texts translated into English. And then in 2019, February, came out a book that I contributed to as well, with many translations, English translations of texts. I think many of her texts have been translated by now, and I know of translators working on some others that have not been yet. And there's a book, Colleen Covignon and Barbara Wharton's book from 1995, maybe? No, sorry, I can't remember. But anyway, a few years back, they published some texts already. So we have, it's not that bad. we have quite a lot now.
That's great. And yeah. What do you like to write specifically about her work?
Well, I went through all those stages. I think like a very typical Spielrein scholar, I think I started with this whole story that I think now is absolutely ridiculous to even think about, the relationship with Jung. You know, her being in this triangle between Jung and Freud, pulled by both of those men, you know, to their sides when they were approaching this breakup between Freud and Jung was approaching. Both of them were pulling her apart in a way, and the whole relationship with Jung, the whole discussion if it was sexual or wasn't, which I find completely irrelevant today. And I mean, of course, it was sexual, but you know, there's so many Jungian scholars who keep on fighting and for that view that it was not sexual and that Jung did not really abuse her at all. And that was completely fine because formally he was not her therapist anymore. I don't get into that anymore. I think what we're trying to do in the association, what we're trying to do in this conference that I hope is happening next April, is to shift focus to her work. So not her life, not her personal relationships, not even how she contributed to other people's work, because this was like stage 2, I think, of this Spielrein scholarship. And this was stage 2 for me too, personally, when I was working on Spielrein. So not how she contributed to Jung's discoveries, to Freud, to and then in Russia to Luria and Vygotsky, for example, to Piaget in Geneva, and so on and so on. But last final stage, I think, is her own work, what she actually did, what she was working on. And I'm in New York now. I came here on the Fulbright Fellowship to work on this project devoted to Spielrein, and I'm working on her model of development of language and thought, and which she came up. Well, she presented it first in 1920 in The Hague during a conference, and then she worked on it. She published on it in few papers, and what I found is that her model, the way she presents it, the way she describes it, has a lot of similarity with Jacques Lacan's 3 stages of development, and especially with Luce Irigaray and Hélène Cixous's approach to language that can be this motherly language or fatherly language, this pre-verbal or verbal. So there's like Spielrein writes about two different languages, two different, more or less that. So that's what I'm focused on now, and I'm after that I'm moving on to a little different project. I think I've worked on Spielrein for so many years. This is my final project.
For now.
So final on Spielrein. I've already started this new project on Jewish women analysts who immigrated to the United States. So I've always been working on women in a way. I've always been doing that. When I was dealing with literature, it was always the forgotten, somehow overlooked female writers. And with psychoanalysis it's the same, but I'm kind of moving away from Spielrein, and because I discovered something here in New York, and I want to focus on that now.
So what are you focusing on next?
So it's a project about I'm looking at this whole wave of intellectual immigration of the 30s. So I'm taking a step back from like clinical psychoanalysis. This project on Spielrein's model of development of language is very it concerns psychoanalytic ideas, and this new one on immigration is more cultural, political, social, historical project. So I'm looking at more broadly at this wave of intellectual immigration of the 30s and to the United States from Europe, and on psychoanalysis in it, and especially on women psychoanalysts. So I was making this huge list. I didn't know it was going to be so huge, but I wanted to make this list of women who, when they were forced to leave in the 30s, some of them were not maybe forced, because some of them left in 31, 32, so maybe even before Hitler came to power, but when things were already happening in Europe. But when they decided to leave, when they were forced to leave, they were already practicing psychoanalysts or training psychoanalysts. And most of them, like, I don't know, probably 90% of them, we really don't know about. And I call myself a cultural historian, and I deal with early psychoanalysis. I never came across those names. Right. So I want to write about them, because many of them have not really contributed in a very significant way. Well, there's one way of looking at it is that they haven't contributed in a very significant way to the history of psychoanalysis, history of ideas, because they haven't published that much, or their works were not that groundbreaking. But I believe that they are part of a community, and especially if you think that if you think about the fact that psychoanalysis in Europe was very much about a community. It was very much about exchange of ideas and views. It was very different in the US. It was very connected with therapy, and it was this medical profession, and it was focused on providing help for patients. But in Europe, the Freud's idea was that psychoanalysis was this social culture project, political too. I mean, early Freudians were very political. Many of them gave up on this in the US because they were socialists or Marxists, and that was, frowned upon, and they hid it or they kind of gave up on it. But in Europe, psychoanalysis there was this idea to reach as many people as possible, to make this accessible. If you ask lay people to read Freud, it's not that difficult to read him. The way he wrote, right, is very accessible. So that was the whole idea. And also, if you read the minutes, that's a very interesting read. I don't know. I like reading stuff like this, sitting in archives, and doing research. When you read that, you see how important discussion was for them. So you had one person or two people presenting a paper or a draft of a paper or some kind of idea. And there was this whole huge discussion of members, and then there were people invited, guests who came over, and everyone contributed. And this in between publications, in between presentations would happen with the discussions, with presenting ideas, with criticizing each other, commenting. I don't think this survived in the US. Maybe it's back now. I'm not really sure, but it wasn't there in the 30s, 40s, 50s. But it was there in Europe. So I think those women that I'm talking about, that we don't know their names at the moment, and they maybe have not contributed by publishing, they did by taking part of those discussions, and they were part of this community. So this is what I want to write a book about, really. Their place, their role, and their stories. How did they immigrate? What was waiting for them? What was the immigration policy of the US? This is some things are really shocking. Some things I didn't know about, like, or the quotas, or the complete aloofness of US when, you know, all those things that were happening in Europe, all the anti-Semitic laws and actions that Hitler was undertaking, and US was still not really responding. Nothing was really happening. They weren't allowing more people to enter. They weren't letting refugees to enter. This is appalling, really. But yeah, so that's the new project.
That's wonderful. I would look forward to reading that book.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and what you're doing is so important, and especially, like you said, focusing on women, because as you spoke about with Spielrein, it's like, first it's talking about, like, first she's lost completely, then it's like about her relationship with these men, and then it's about, oh, okay, she did think too, and so, like, now we could see how the men absorbed her ideas, and then finally it's like, oh, actually she was a whole fleshed out person of her own. But it feels like this is happening with a lot of women from history, and it's like in the past couple of decades, finally more and more people are getting, more and more women are being unearthed. I just wrote a book about art and psychoanalysis, and there's a wonderful book about Dada artists that were women by this woman named Ruth Hemus, who's in the UK, and, you know, she writes about 4 women that I knew, but then one, Selena, no, I'd never heard of her, and she was like in all of the Dada, like, plays and performances, and wrote in all of the journals, and was photographed with everybody, but it's like her name is like, I had never heard her before. So it's such a common story, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. But it's so wonderful that we have this whole, you know, wave of interest in a way, and all that research. The last thing I saw before New York closed up was, I saw this performance about Mozart's sister. It was also very moving. Another person, you know, that's had this, well, if she was a man, she would have made an incredible career, but she wasn't. Another thing that comes to my head, I mean, it's different, but I think about politics a lot.
Great.
It's just time, you know. But I was thinking during when Biden was picking up his VP, and when he announced he's going to be a woman, you had all those women all of a sudden being their names were being discussed in the media. They were all of a sudden brought up. Well, of course, some of them were well known, but some of them weren't. I'm not that. I mean, I'm learning about American politics. I've only just, you know, came here in September. So of course I didn't know them. But as far as I know, many people maybe knew the names, but didn't know what they were doing. So this is, I had this thought that maybe this was pretty amazing that he announced he's going to be a woman. And then we had all those people had all those ideas, who could it be? And then even in this area, completely different from psychoanalysis and academia, we had a discussion about all those women that were before that, they and then we learned that they had you know, many contributions, very important contributions, but were not really that important.
Exactly. So. No, they had written all these bills and pushed certain things through over the years, but you hadn't really heard their names either as getting credit.
Yeah.
What a time to come to the US and New York just in
Yeah,
September.
I know. It's insane. Yeah.
It's
But
an
you know,
experience.
yeah, but it's also you know, it's interesting in this, you know, interesting like this there's this, you know, Chinese curse that may you live in interesting times. I think
Right.
that's the interesting times we live in. But yeah, but it is interesting also, true.
It is
So
interesting.
much
And you
thing
did
going
get
on.
to see New York from September till March, so that's good.
Yes, yes. Now I rarely leave Harlem when I live, which is pretty insane, you know, to live in New York and not really leave your apartment that much, walk around your neighborhood. But I got to know my neighborhood very well. That's another interesting thing in a way, you know. I because yeah, I don't take the train, so I don't travel far, I don't commute anywhere. I just go on a walk. So like, so there's those streets next to my street, like next block, 2 blocks away. I didn't know about those areas. I didn't really, you know, I didn't really go there because and I live in an incredibly beautiful part of Harlem. It's called Hamilton Heights. Everything here is about Alexander Hamilton. But it's really beautiful. You know, brownstones, beautiful trees, amazing people. But I never really walked around that much in this neighborhood, and now I do. And I got to, you know, when you walk slowly, when you walk, you get to experience everything around you. When you hurry to work or when you take a train, you don't really see that. So that's an upside.
Exactly. It's made everyone kind of stop and, yeah, pay attention to more immediate surroundings and internal experiences too, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, at least for me, when the conference happens, now I can make sure to go, because I think when it was happening before, I was actually going to be in New York because of this APA conference. So now when you do have the conference, I'll be sure to be able to go. You were having like a whole walking tour, and it sounded really exciting.
Yes, it's a 3-day conference, and I wanted it. Well, it was. I'm the main organizer of the conference, so I really wanted to bring people to Warsaw. That was the first idea. And Spielrein's father was born in Warsaw, and she went to school there for a little bit. So this was that's a justification. But I really wanted to meet also kind of between the West and the East, and I really wanted to make it in my hometown. But because of that, I started to think, okay, so how about I show people a little bit of Warsaw during those 3 days as well. So we got one thing we have is we started collaboration with a Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, and they invited us for a guided tour of Ringelblum archives. I don't know if you know what that's. During the war in the ghetto, people would, there was this initiative to collect as many documents as possible, whatever people had, letters that they wrote, and, you know, birth certificates, everything that they had. And I think there were 3 containers. I think there were 3 containers, and they found only 2. That they put them in a like I'm not sure how it's called in English. It's like this metal milk container, and they put it in there, and buried it on the ground. And then this was found after the war.
Wow. And
it took this huge group of people many years, of course, to preserve it, because it was the metal bottle or whatever this was corroded, and I think some other documents were hidden in just like a cardboard box, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly. But anyway, they had to restore the documents, and they made this amazing exhibition out of it. It's very moving. It really makes you cry. but it's an amazing exhibition. So this is one of the things that participants of the conference have. This is one of the things we're doing. Another thing, we have this amazing tour guide, Agnieszka Haska, who's going to take us around the ghetto. And so it's like a night walk around the ghetto and the former ghetto area. And she's going to talk about, with a focus of psychoanalysis or psychologists. So she's going to say who lived where, what was happening where. So this is another thing that we're doing.
That's wonderful. And I think it really is important to like re-bridge psychoanalysis and politics, because as you said in the beginning, it was really political for a long time. And it feels like that really got split or like repressed when the immigration happened to the US, because, you know, the US was hostile in other ways, you know what I mean? And it probably wasn't really welcomed. And people also just had to kind of protect themselves, I think. So it remained kind of underground for a really long time. But I feel like really recently, more and more people I meet that are engaged in psychoanalysis are specifically engaged in practice and like bringing psychoanalysis to more and more people, and also making psychoanalysis more political and like having a voice kind of in the greater cultural sphere instead of just being like in the consulting room.
Yeah, that's great. I don't really know much about what's happening now, but that's great. I know about differences during the 30s when, you know, in Berlin, well, in Europe generally, they would have clinics next to institutes. They would open clinics with low fees, and in Berlin, in the institute in Berlin, everyone had to treat one patient for free. So there's ideas like this, and also fees would be adjusted to capabilities of the patient. In US, nothing like this was happening. Mm-hmm. So after a while, there was this idea, I think in Chicago, that in the Chicago Institute, that they would have low fee clinic, but it's completely different approach. Yeah, and you know, now we're in a time of crisis, and so many people, more people need help, right? So I've read about many initiatives now because of COVID, because of racial unrest, all that's happening. That's really you know, stressing people out. And I've read about many initiatives that are happening now when people, when psychoanalysts or therapists really offer free help, free therapy, free advice. Mm-hmm. So that's really amazing, because I bet people really need it. And the ones that need it most, people who we call, you know, essential workers, they're the ones that can afford it. Mm-hmm. That's really amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Be bringing treatment to people who are on the front lines, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you, I really love reading like letters, and I love like reading notes from meetings and things like that, like the things that weren't like meant to be published. I love reading those kinds of things. And like Spielrein's diaries, for example, like I remember the first time I read through that, it was like, how do you write like this in your personal journal? It's like the most beautiful prose, you know?
Yes.
It made me feel really inefficient. It's like, my diaries do not sound like this. They're beautiful. They're really, really beautiful. So that would be wonderful if the association is able to get more and more access to her letters and be able to archive and preserve and kind of make the work even more accessible. I had forgotten about those books that recently came out, and I think that's because I like pre-ordered them when they were coming out, and I have not received them. So I am going to check on that. Yeah, I find that happens a lot, where I get excited and then I pre-order something and then I realize like much later, like I've never gotten that. And then I have to go back and check and see what happened. So I'm going to do that literally right after we hang up. Be like, where are my books?
Remind you about that. Well, I'm very excited about Spielrein. I've been for years now, and I'm really looking forward to this conference. Because it's been postponed and so much has been happening lately, I don't think about it that much at the moment. And we postponed it in February, so 2 months before the conference, not even, I think. So I had almost everything done. And it's insane how much you have to do. I mean, all the catering and the recording and like so many things you don't really think about, you know, we managed to get 4 grants for this conference, which was amazing. And I never expected that. And then so many partners who help us out, like the Polish Academy of Sciences that gave us the room for the conference, or the Jewish Historical Institute that, like I mentioned before, they give this amazing tour, and IPU, the International Psychological University in Berlin, their main partner, they helped us to have everything to organize everything and to well, they help us to get the grants because we were able to apply as a Polish-German cooperation, which is very very valued. It's easier to get money as a Polish-Jewish cooperation due to history, obviously. It's still very valued. And then we talk about Jewish issues, so we got the money because of that. But yeah, so I was thinking, okay, grants, room, you know, we have a program ready and we're all set. But no, there were so many tiny things. But all of this is really done now. Of course, we don't know. I mean, the program might change because we'll see who's able to come, who isn't. And you know, we're not even sure if it's happening in April. We'll see, you know, how we're doing the vaccine and if we're in the clear by then. But there's one thing I'm very excited about, and you know, I'd like to invite everyone who'd like to participate. We as an association have a website. It's spielreinassociation.org. You have all the info about the conference there and about Spielrein, like everything we have managed to collect. So all the photographs, they're not many, they're there in the gallery. A list of her papers, which took many scholars a long time to gather this list, to put it together. We had the whole list. And if any of the papers are free to access, you have access through our website. And then there's a list of publications about Spielrein with access to whatever is, you know, accessible, freely accessible. And yeah, so that's the conference, that's the website. But what I'm most interested and excited about lately is this, I don't know, politics, immigration, women, you know, dictatorships all over the world. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure if that's what you want, if you want to talk politics.
No, it's totally fine. It's absolutely essential right now. And it's all interrelated, you know. I think this idea, older idea of like that you leave certain topics at the door and they're not discussed, it's really done us a disservice as a whole, because people need to keep discussing this even in times when they don't feel as critical, because they're always critical. This is always critical, you know.
Yeah, but you're right that, you know, everything is really connected. And when I read all those texts about immigration of the 30s, you know, the immigration policy of the United States, of course, I think about Trump and his immigration policy, his executive orders, his ideas. You know, you probably heard he had this idea, for example, completely insane idea, which thankfully he dropped after Harvard and MIT, I think, sued him or threatened to sue him, that he wanted all the foreign students to leave US if they didn't. So if all of their classes were remote, and that's a very big chance that they were, because basically almost all the universities start having virtual classes in the fall. Mm-hmm. So if all of their classes were to be remote, they would have to leave US. Do it from their home country. So, and then he walked it back. But you know, this resonates with what was happening in the 30s. And of course, you know, when I read about trying to refresh my memory, how Hitler was coming into power and how this was happening, how gradual this is. like, for example, we say, okay, 1933 he became chancellor, but no, it started in 1930 when his party was getting more and more, becoming more and more popular, getting more and more seats in the parliament. And this makes me think about the dictators of dictatorships of today, dictators today, and I started listing them and there's a huge list of them, and what they're doing, slowly, it's the same idea, basically. It's the same I don't know, schedule that they're following, like Hitler did. So this, it's this. I'm a historian at heart, cultural historian at work. I would not call myself like a real historian, but I think when you look at history, I mean, it's always so painful for me. When you look at history, you see how much it repeats itself. Why don't we learn from it? It's so frustrating.
No, it's really, really true. And I feel like there's been a lot of scholars who have said, like, this is happening for years already, since the beginning of him, and people just didn't take it seriously enough, and still aren't in some ways. And I feel like you said, like before there was this era of Trump, we had like the Tea Party, where the Republicans all of a sudden got really, really right wing, and everyone just thought like this. I mean, the Tea Party seems so far fetched, but now that's like the norm in the Republican Party. So it's like you can't discount things when they happen and think that they're not really having that much of a hold, or not take them seriously. I feel like people didn't take this seriously in a lot of ways, including a lot of the politicians in the US. They thought like, oh, who is this guy? He's new to politics. He doesn't know what he's doing. But people that don't know what they're doing can cause real serious problems.
Yeah. And I was reading, like a couple of weeks ago, I was reading, how did this even happen that Hitler came to power, and how does it even happen that the Nazi Party took over the parliament? And so the research showed that many people voted for Hitler, his party, because they believed that they didn't like him. They were saying, okay, but he's so loud, let's give it to him, he's not going to do anything, so this is going to like kind of he's going to kind of blow up. So he's this is going to end soon, because there's nothing behind his words, there's nothing happening, so let's vote for him just to have it done with. Or some other people were saying, let's give him a chance. And I remember this happening in Poland, for example, when the Law and Justice Party came to power. So this was 5 years ago, right? Because there's just been 5 years ago, and people were so fed up with the previously ruling party, the Civic Platform, that they were saying, I don't know, they were definitely not seeing Law and Justice Party as a threat, the threat they became. And they, like in Germany, they weren't seeing Hitler as that threatening, and they downplayed this, and they were saying, let's give him a chance, or we're so fed up with the Civic Platform, and so on and so on. And Law and Justice, they won, and they started changing Poland into, well, not undemocratic country, and they started doing what Hitler has always been doing, undermining institutions that that check them, that control them, like the courts, for example. This is one of the biggest battles in Poland, and that's it's exactly the same that's happening in Hungary, of course Belarus, that's and Trump's doing the same thing, right? So it's like, if you look at this, you think, oh my God, stop. You can't just vote for someone because you're fed up with the previous government, or because let's give him a chance, or because, because there were signs there that Law and Justice is incredibly conservative, racist, anti-Semitic, nationalistic, undemocratic, populistic party. This was obvious. So yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And like you're saying, it's nothing new. These we can see the signs. People have studied this a lot, especially since World War II. And we need to listen to those scholars. And I just watched this film, Official Secrets, last night, which has Keira Knightley. Speaking of Sabina Spielrein, she was in it, and it was about when George W. Bush was in power, and how like he wanted to get information, certain information to justify going into Iraq, his weapons of mass destruction, and how when he wasn't getting that information, Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, like, instead of listening to the CIA's information, they just created their own organization to collect information, and then lo and behold, that organization gave them the information they wanted. So like that was 20 years ago, and they did it then. So even with Trump, it's like he's not that new, even though I feel like the difference with him is that he's so like blatant. It's like he's just doing it all out for everyone to see, and doesn't even understand why it's a problem, because he's like, of course this is how the US works. Whereas everyone else pretended it didn't work that way.
It's just insane that he's president. Oh my god. It's just it's every day there's something. That's something I listened to. I started listening to, with the pandemic, my life has really, really changed. And I got stuck at home with two kids, homeschooling for the first 3 months, doing math and PE and dance and English skills and all that. I have a 4 and 7-year-old. So that was tough. And I kind of switched from reading books, I switched to listening to podcasts and audiobooks, because like I would walk around the playground, for example, or my kids would play and I would just walk around listening instead of sitting on the bench and reading, because I had this feeling that I've been sitting the whole day basically in front of computer with my daughters first and then my own work. So those amazing podcasts I've been listening to, and like I listen a lot to Pod Save America, and my favorite, Deconstructed, with Mehdi Hassan. And one of those, I don't remember which one, I think Mehdi was saying, but I think actually as a guest on Pod Save America, he was saying that there's so much going on. There's some big story every day. Trump says something completely insane, or does something, or signs an executive order is completely insane every day and irrelevant, or he endorses some conspiracy theory mad woman who says that I don't know, whatever, aliens may give us COVID or something like this, and he retweets her tweets, or he he tells us to use whatever this was he wanted us to inject to get rid of COVID, bleach or something, and so on and so on. So there's so much that we forget. Like, we grew complacent with what had happened, and we forget that what he said before, and also what had happened, like what happened with. That's why there's this idea of remembering, for example, all those victims, usually Black, but not only, of police brutality, like all those people who were pushed to the ground by police, completely peaceful Protestants. Like there was this older man who got pushed and he started bleeding. I don't remember his name, and we forget about this. And this is so threatening. This is so terrible. And I found myself forgetting too, because my life is filled with all of that anxiety and frustration and uncertainty. So we just forget. And this is so we should remind ourselves, or we should have leaders who remind us, or we should let scholars and scientists remind us, that, so 2 weeks ago this happened, and then this happened. No, let's not forget about this. let's not lose this amidst this whole mess and insanity that's happening.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Should we stop with that point? Is there anything
Sure.
else that you wanted to talk about? I always like to stop it at a point where I want people to like, now go think about that. That's that's how I always feel at the ending. Instead of being like, bye, that was nice talking to you. I like feeling like people need to like go think about that. I just wanted to hear all about your association and how that happened, because I think it's really fantastic endeavor. And now that I hear about your work that you're doing moving forward, that sounds like just as a fantastic endeavor. So it's really wonderful to have discovered you and your work.
Thank you. I think I had this thought now that I should have probably, that when I was telling you that how John Launer and me, we started talking about the association. At some point, John came up with this idea to include one more person, to invite Adrian Harris. And we did it, the three of us. That's just, I just realized that I maybe should have added this one more sentence to talk about Adrian as well, who's an amazing, incredibly generous person, psychoanalyst in New York. And so it was the three of us setting up the association. And so when I said I'm here on the Fulbright Fellowship, and I mentioned my project on language, Spielrein, my faculty advisor here is an amazing person. So it's Pamela Cooper White, and I just like to say she's been an amazing person, incredibly helpful, supportive, understanding, patient, and just a great friend too.
Yeah, and that's wonderful that you were able to have a Fulbright and to specifically focus on this work.
Yeah, they liked it.
It's great. It's important.
I sold it. Well, I had to. It's people usually ask, when I try to get a grant, but why history? Why is it important? Like, come on, really? But today it's so obvious it's important, but it's always been the thing that I had to explain. So why are you dealing with someone who died in 1942? Why not something more, current, more present? Well,
yeah,
why, right?
That's amazing. I don't even understand the question. It's like, what are you talking about? Let's first think about how she died, and then maybe we'll talk about more.
Yeah, but I think it's because it's about money. So if you give money to a research project, you want it to be groundbreaking, right? So you prefer someone who's looking for a cure for cancer to someone who's digging in archives. I get that. But I think really, history, I think we're responsible for the past, So, and now when I have children, I understand this even more. It's really important how we tell other people and our kids and ourselves about history. We are responsible for it. It's not neutral in a way. It's not just facts. It's how you present it, how you talk about it, what you emphasize, what and who you forget, who you leave out. Right. So I think it's actually, this is my personal responsibility to talk about history, and especially now. Come on, let's just all go back to history books and read about what happened. And and I was listening to this amazing podcast too. I listen to a lot of those. That's WNYC, the New York City Radio. They have amazing podcasts too in this series called Radio Lab. Mm-hmm. And it was about this aftermath of 1918 pandemic. It was really interesting. They were talking about how the pandemic influenced the talks between Woodrow Wilson and the French Prime Minister Clemenceau. Sorry, I forgot for a second. They were talking about, there were the two main forces talking about how to deal with Germany after the war. And Wilson was saying, let's create the League of Nations, let's invite Germany there, let's think more broadly about how to stop another war from ever happening. And Clemenceau was saying, no, let's punish them. He wanted retaliation. And Wilson got sick. There's no way of saying if he had the flu, but this was in Paris, as far as I remember, and there was a second wave coming through Paris at that time. And he got sick. He had all the symptoms of the flu. And after this, he softened. And the League of Nations was created, but without Germany. And Germany was severely punished. And historians say, well, this was one of the causes of the rise of Hitler, right? This punishment, this humiliation of Germany that was really pushed into depression. And yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing they were saying was about Gandhi, who was, during the war, Gandhi was speaking, he was speaking publicly. He was telling people to join the forces with UK and fight together. He got sick, and he most definitely had the flu, and India was incredibly affected. They had between 10 and 20 million of deaths during the pandemic, while, for example, US had 500,000. So he got sick for months. And during those months, he started writing, and it seems like he really rethought his whole life. And there's a lot about God. There's a lot about, you know, just changing your life, transforming your life during this, when he thought he's going to die. It was so bad, and it lasted for months. And when he came out of it, he changed his attitude. He said, yeah, let's fight, but against UK, and let's not fight, you know, not a military fight anymore. So there's changes in art, for example, this approach to, the theory is that before the war, painters would paint human bodies, and after the war, there was a shift far away from this to more abstract painting, because bodies were, you know, bodies during the war, bodies during the pandemic, deformed, wounded, bleeding, and so on. So all of that, that's very, very interesting, and yeah, that's again something we could be learning from. Could be thinking, what's happening with us during this pandemic? And I hope it will last. I hope it lasts, but it seems like there's this transformation, at least in the US, happening with many things that are caused by the pandemic and by all the, you know, in the wake of George Floyd's murder and all the other Black people murdered by white policemen, and all the racial unrest, all the protests that's been happening. I hope it lasts. I mean, I hope it's not just words, but it seems like, I think, you know, I'm new to this. So it's all very new to me, but I think the official stance was that US got rid of racism, that it's gone, that, well, they are, you know, like individual instances of racist attacks, but it's not a rule. And so there was the war, there was Martin Luther King, there were the 60s or the marches and so on. So now it's all good. And then first the pandemic showed this huge gap. And this is, well, it's awful to say this, but in a way it is an upside to the pandemic. So it showed, you know, I can't remember the numbers now, but huge discrepancy in number of cases of white people versus Black and brown people. And why is that? You know, this is something they discovered. They all of a sudden, they opened their eyes and they said, oh, really? There are those gaps there. Achievement gaps, education gaps, financial gaps, you know. And then we had this, you know, all of a sudden, we had this new category of people called the essential workers, who are on the first line, who, you know, who drive buses and who work at grocery stores. And of course, all the people in hospitals, people who collect garbage and all that, like many, many people. And so, and then there's a question, but wait, but if those people get sick with COVID, do they even have insurance? Because usually those people don't have it or have a very cheap insurance. So What do we do about this? How unfair is that, right? So this happened, and then, for example, I attended this meeting with the DOE and town hall, and they were talking about how all the anti-racist protests, they made them rethink how little time they devoted at schools to the issues of racism, how little they speak about that. So they said they want to change that. They want to change the curriculum for schools, which seems amazing too. I just really hope, they actually do it. So I really hope it's not going to be like, okay, we have a vaccine. And then also, that's another question, right? So one thing is to have a vaccine. Second thing is, who gets it? Right? Is it just the rich Republicans who get it? Or do we all get it? Do immigrants like me get it? Is it free, or is it affordable at least? Do essential workers get it first? That's like so many questions like that unfortunately the president of the United States really don't care about.
Not at all. And like you said too, with this idea of like sending everyone back to their home countries to do their education, since it's all online anyway, as if that's an option for everyone. Like as if everyone could just all of a sudden go back to a place where they've been uprooted or have left, or like everyone has a home there waiting for them.
Yeah, but this was just really cruel, I think, just cruel, because if you think about economy, foreign students who come to US, they help the economy. They pay for things here like food and accommodation and buy clothes and so on and so on. So that's the idea was ridiculous. So I think it was just cruel, just vicious. Yeah, but that's something, when I came to New York, I love the city. It's an amazing, amazing city. But most of all, I love the people here. I think people are so welcoming, just really incredibly welcoming and open. And I did my PhD in Edinburgh. And in Edinburgh at that time, there were many Polish people, in the UK, generally speaking. And I was doing my PhD, and I was working in a restaurant as a waitress. And there were many Polish people working in that restaurant, mostly in the kitchen, in the back. And we had different lives. That's true. I mean, I had an apartment. I was studying there. And most of the people I met there, Polish people, they would really try to save money. So they would have, they would share a partner with many people. Even some people would be sleeping in the kitchen. But because they were just trying to make as much money as possible, they were sending money home. I didn't have to send money home to my parents. I mean, that's not what I went there for. I did there to study, to have my PhD. But they went there to make money, send it home to their parents who did not have enough money. So they were helping their parents. But so Scottish people who are otherwise, well, I mean, okay, that's a huge generalization, but I had many situations where Scottish people who are amazing, and I really like them. I really enjoyed Edinburgh, a beautiful, amazing city. But I had this conversation when people would say, "Oh, so where are you from?" I say, "Oh, I'm from Poland." Okay. So what are you doing here? I'm studying. Oh, great. So as long as I was studying, it was great. But there was this idea, which is completely false, that immigrants, this is what Trump says today, immigrants come to a different country to take the jobs away from the natives. That's absolutely absurd. I'm not an economist, but people say, well, the economists say that's not what happens. We don't take their jobs away. We help the economy.
And if anything, it helps the economy. So
yeah, but this was there. And in New York, I never had a single conversation like this. No one asked, what I came here to do. If I came here to to work as a waitress or to study or am I a refugee? No one ever asked us. Everyone was incredibly welcoming and supportive to me and my kids. And my kids went to school here. They didn't speak English at all. They really needed support. 2 different schools, because my younger one was in a like a pre-K 3K actually for 3 years old, and my older one was in 2nd grade, and they needed support, and they got it because children of those amazing people who are amazing to me were amazing to my kids. Aww. Yes, this was really wow. I was really impressed how welcoming those people were. They really did not care about anything, why I came here, what I'm doing here, if I'm taking someone's job away or not.
No, it's really nice to hear. I feel like, yeah, I really loved living in New York. I lived there for almost 10 years. And yeah, it's just, I feel like everybody has this kind of vibe of like that we're all like in this together. Like there's definitely like kind of a community vibe going on where like it's a difficult place to live, but it's really rewarding, and everybody is working a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And so everybody's really hustling, I feel like, and everybody like understands that and is like trying to support everybody else. It's not like competitive in this way of like, you know, that kind of like you're taking something from me, but it's all like everybody's kind of hustling together.
Yeah, I think there's this level up from, you know, competition to cooperation, really, and support. Yeah,
trying definitely to help everybody else get up too.
yeah. And you know, I'm from Europe, and we're really good at creating communities, I think, especially Poland is, I think, in the time of danger, because we've always been, you know, our history is one danger, one disaster after another, you know, one war after another, losing independence for 123 years and then regaining it just to really lose it to Russia. And so we're good at this, creating communities, helping out. When COVID started in Poland, there's so many initiatives, like neighbors would put up information in their buildings saying, if you're older, if you're an elderly person, if you need any help with groceries, let me know, I'll get you groceries. Just like that, just really like grassroots initiatives, you know. So I really appreciated this here, because I wasn't expecting to find any of that community feeling in the US, because I know, well, the idea I had, which I revised, but I had, is that it's mostly about, you know, everyone for themselves, and it's this individualism. That's the idea. That's what I was expecting very much, and sort of happy to be wrong.
Pleasantly surprised.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard a discussion with Dr. Klara Naszkowska. For more, please visit the Spielrein Association website at spielreinassociation.org. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry. From Trapart Books, 2019. For more, please visit our publisher's website, trapart.net. That's TRAPART.net. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated. For more information, you can also visit my website, drvanessasinclair.net, or the podcast main website, renderingunconscious.org. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. Ourselves and based on you ever. Identity ego is first formed during the child experiences herself and the mirror image appears. Sexuality is a force of nature that yourself be possessed by in New York City. Currently represented via our bodies, considered object. Geissenberg showed the cutting up of language creates the space for something slowly third being embodies countless numbers. Polymorphous perversity, transsexual, androgyny is divine. Being possessed, repossessed, as these sites are relaxation. We are simply sexual, repression, apparent. Vanessa Sinclair. Psychoanalysis, the pores of the skin. We learn about as these are the penetrated and expel. Constricted to, nor constructed, and biology are limited. How anymore? Only contained. As self, every self. It is the object, dropped, not heterosexual, homosexual. Sexuality is not underground by either the unconscious sexuality, third mind.